From unsolved mysteries to unexplained phenomena, from comedy gold to relationship fails, Amazon Music's got the most ad-free top podcasts, included with Prime. Because the only thing that should interrupt your listening is, well, nothing. Download the Amazon Music app today.
Okay, welcome back. It really feels like navigating the immigration system is just constantly shifting. And, well, what seems to be coming up now is this really direct challenge, not just to immigrants, but to the people trying to help them. They're lawyers, advocates. We've gathered quite a few reports here from ttownmedia.com, NBC, Boston, Wire ED, to Boston Globe, NPR, even a piece from Boston Review. They're all looking at these recent actions, seemingly from the Trump administration, that look like they're, well, targeting immigration attorneys and advocates.
Yeah, it's a concerning pattern that seems to be emerging from these sources.
Exactly. So if you're trying to cut through all the noise and just get a handle on what's really going on and why it actually matters, that's what we're aiming for in this deep dive. Our mission here is to really understand, what these actions are, what the administration says the reasons are, and how the people affected see it. And crucially, we're staying focused on the constitutional issues raised, not taking political sides.
Absolutely, just laying out what the reports say.
Okay, so let's dig in. Where does this seem to start?
Well, looking at the ttownmedia.com article, it kind of points back to March 22nd. There was this memo from President Trump, and it really set a specific tone.
What did it say?
He basically accused immigration attorneys and law firms of unscrupulous behavior. The accusation was that they were coaching clients, asylum seekers specifically, to lie to get, quote, undeserved relief.
Wow. Okay, so not just a general statement, but a direct accusation of coaching people to lie. And was there any action tied to that?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't just talk. The memo actually directed Attorney General Pam Bondi and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem to go after sanctions. Sanctions against attorneys involved in what the memo called frivolous, unreasonable, and vexatious litigation against the government.
So framing legal challenges as basically obstruction, that's a pretty strong message to send to the legal community working on these cases.
Exactly. And the Sci-Town Media piece gets into how lawyers are reacting. Attorneys in Los Angeles, for instance, they see this pretty clearly as intimidation.
To stop them defending clients, presumably.
That's their take, yeah. To deter them from, fighting hard for clients seeking asylum or facing deportation.
There's a quote in there from Meredith Brown, right? An attorney.
Yes.
Meredith Brown. She said something quite striking that in her, 25 years doing immigration law, she's never seen direct attacks like this, not just on lawyers, but on organizations, pro-immigrant groups like Churlai.
That really puts it into perspective. If a 25-year veteran says it's unprecedented, that suggests a real shift.
It does. And then you have Patricia Corrales, who's interesting because she used to be a DHS attorney.
Oh, right. What's her perspective?
She basically says, look, when I was at DHS for almost 20 years, it was about upholding the law, ensuring due process. Now, working privately, she's essentially telling the administration, if you break the law, if you intimidate my clients, if you deny due process, we'll see you in court.
Pretty direct challenge back. Very direct. She and others quoted there, they frame it not as politics, but as defending the Constitution. Brown even calls the Constitution a living document. They're ready to defend against what they see as the administration ignoring parts of it.
Okay, so we have this high-level directive, these accusations. But then things seem to get very specific, almost bizarre, with this incident involving a Massachusetts attorney.
Ah, yes, the Nicole Materoni case. This got picked up by NBC, Boston, Wired, the Boston Globe. It's quite something. She's an immigration attorney, a U.S. citizen, born and raised in Massachusetts.
That's standard stuff so far.
Right. Then on Friday, April 11th, 2025, she gets this email, looks official, from DHS, and it tells her, a U.S. citizen, to leave the country within 7 days.
Wait, leave the country? A U.S. citizen?
Yeah, because her, quote, parole status had been terminated. It makes no sense, obviously. She doesn't have parole status.
That's unbelievable. How does something like that even happen? What was her reaction?
Well, initially, she thought it must be for a client, right? It makes sense. But no, her name was the only one on it. She said the language was really threatening, kind of like spam almost, which, makes you worry about the quality control on these official notices.
Seriously? Did DHS offer any explanation for sending a deportation notice to a U.S. citizen?
They did. A senior DHS official, quoted in the Globe and NBC Boston, blamed it on email addresses provided by non-citizens. The theory is an immigrant might give their lawyer's email as a contact point.
Okay, I see. So the system sends an automated notice about parole ending, and it goes to the lawyer's address instead of the actual person.
That's the explanation given. The official said CBP is monitoring and fixing these case by case.
But still, for Macaroni, it must have been alarming.
Absolutely. She called it really scary and felt it showed a serious lack of care. She even wondered if it was maybe a deliberate scare tactic, just to generally make people afraid of the whole immigration process.
Yeah, you can see why she'd think that. Wired reported on his social media post too, right? Expressing that same concern about the lack of care.
Yep. She was pretty vocal about her disbelief.
And the Boston Globe piece put this email into a bigger picture, didn't it? Connecting it to parole programs.
It did. It linked these emails to a wider Trump administration push to cancel parole for lots of migrants admitted under Biden-era programs.
Like the CBP One app users.
Exactly. People who use the CBP One app, and also folks granted humanitarian parole, specifically mentioning Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, though they noted an exception for Ukrainian and Afghan refugees.
And the numbers involved were huge, weren't they?
Staggering, really. The Globe mentioned aiming to cancel parole for over 500,000 from those 4 countries granted humanitarian parole since late 2022, plus over 900,000 who came in via the CBP One app.
Wow. That's potentially over 1 million people facing a sudden change in status.
It's massive. And Sarah Sherman Stokes from BU Law, quoted in the Globe, pointed out something really concerning. A lot of these people, especially the CBP One users, they gave the government their personal info. They followed the rules to enter legally.
Right, they did what they were asked to do.
And now they get an email basically telling them to self-deport. It feels like a betrayal of that process.
Jeff Thielman from the International Institute of New England saw this happening to his clients, too.
Yeah, he told the Globe many of his clients, mostly Haitians who came legally through CBP One, got these letters. He said it caused absolute terror and confusion. They played by the rules, and now this.
It sounds incredibly destabilizing for people who thought they were following the correct procedure.
Definitely. And another Massachusetts attorney, Megan Klutt, she offered a sort of pragmatic view in the Globe piece. She basically suggested it's a pressure tactic.
How so?
Her thinking was maybe the administration knows deporting everyone formally through the courts is a huge logistical challenge. So send these scary letters. Maybe some people will just give up and leave on their own without needing court proceedings.
Kind of a way to bypass the system, perhaps? So you've got the rhetoric against lawyers and then these mass emails causing fear, even hitting citizens by mistake. It feels multifaceted.
It does. And then there's another really troubling incident, the detention of attorney Amir Makled.
Okay, tell me about that one. Where did this happen?
This was reported by NPR. Makled is a Michigan-based attorney, also a U.S. citizen. He was coming back from a family vacation in the Dominican Republic, flying into Detroit Metro Airport.
Right.
His family gets through customs fine, but he gets pulled aside. Approached by agents identified as the Tactical Terrorism Response Team.
Whoa, okay. Tactical Terrorism Response Team. For a lawyer coming back from vacation, that sounds intense.
Makled said his heart fell into his stomach. And then, according to NTR, these border agents spent over 90 minutes trying to get him to hand over his cell phone.
His personal phone. Did they say why?
They pressured him, but he refused. His reason was crucial potential attorney-client privileged information on that phone. He couldn't just hand it over.
Right, that makes sense. Is there any context for why he might have been singled out by a terrorism response team?
Well, this is where it gets pointed. One of Makeld's clients is a student who was charged over involvement in a pro-Palestinian protest at the University of Michigan.
Ah, and the administration had been talking about cracking down on visa holders supporting Palestine.
Exactly. Makled himself believes that's why he was targeted. He thinks it was because he represents that student, and the attempt to get his phone wasn't about terrorism, but intimidation. A chilling effect, as he put it, to discourage lawyers from taking these kinds of politically charged cases.
Did CBP respond to that specific allegation?
NPR said they hadn't gotten a response from CBP at the time, but they noted CBP had told the Detroit Free Press earlier that electronic searches hadn't actually increased, and claims of targeting based on politics were baseless.
So, CBP says it's not happening. Makled says it absolutely happened to him, and here's why.
Pretty much. Makeld's counter-argument, reported by NTR, is basically, okay, if there was no probable cause, no warrant, no actual security threat for me, then why try so hard to get my phone? He insists it was intimidation tied to his work representing students, immigrants, political dissenters.
He also mentioned getting support from the legal community.
Yeah, he said the local bar association in the community reached out, which he felt showed people were really disturbed by this. He framed it as fundamentally against American values and the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches. An attorney being subjected to this at the border, it raises alarms. It really does. And this Makled incident, it connects pretty directly to the wider patterns discussed in that Boston Review article you mentioned earlier.
Right, the leaked database.
Exactly. That piece highlights a leaked Homeland Security database that specifically listed activists, journalists, and, crucially, an immigration attorney named Nicole Ramos from the group Al Otro Lado.
So, confirmation that the government was keeping tabs on specific advocates.
It certainly looks that way based on the leak. The article details problems Ramos faced, like her Sentry Pass, that trusted traveler card being revoked with no explanation, and her colleagues at Al Otro Lado facing harassment, being detained, denied entry to Mexico.
And it got worse than just travel hassles, didn't it?
Much worse. The article reports their staff in Tijuana faced death threats, smear campaigns, constant surveillance for over a year. It's intense.
And were officials involved in the smear campaigns?
Disturbingly, yes. Boston Review reported CBP officials were allegedly bad-mouthing Al Otro Lado to migrants, calling Ramos a fake attorney who coaches lies, which sounds awfully similar to the language in that Trump memo we started with.
It really does echo that. It's like the official rhetoric is filtering down to interactions on the ground.
It seems that way. Al Otro Lado actually petitioned the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights because they felt the Mexican government wasn't protecting their staff, especially after they sued the Trump administration over immigration policies.
So the database itself, what was its official name? Something revealing.
Yeah, the name was San Diego Sector Foreign Operations Branch, Migrant Caravan FY 2019, suspected organizers, coordinators, instigators, and media. Quite a title.
And mostly U.S. citizens on it, you said?
The article says the vast majority were U.S. citizens. It had photos, personal info, even like Ramos's travel logs.
What was CBP's reason for having this list?
Their justification, per the Boston Review, was needing to question people about border unrest in Tijuana back then.
But did that hold up?
Well, the article points out that some people harassed later weren't even in Tijuana during the unrest, which kind of undermines the official reasons, suggesting maybe it was more about tracking advocates generally.
And this wasn't just happening right at the San Diego border.
Apparently not. The Boston Review mentions a report by Dana Francesca Haynes to the UN documenting 37 cases where immigration advocates and activists were stopped while traveling, sometimes far from the border, suggesting maybe broader watch lists were involved.
It feels like a pattern going back a bit, too.
The article reminds us, Jeff Sessions talking about dirty immigration lawyers in 2017, then ICE summoning attorney journalist Dan Kowalski in 2018 just for sharing a leaked memo. It suggests a certain friction between the administration and those challenging its policies.
And it wasn't just lawyers, but activist groups, too.
Right. Pueblo Sin Fronteras activists reported more secondary inspections, heavy questioning. Some of them were apparently in that leaked database, too.
The Boston Review also mentioned journalists facing similar issues.
Increased reports of journalists being hassled by CBP, denied entry to Mexico, intimidating searches, which obviously raises huge red flags about press freedom and protecting sources.
And the article ended on a note about technology, didn't it?
Yeah, a sort of broader concern about all this data collection and electronic monitoring at the border. While maybe some see it as better than walls, the article warns about the potential downsides for privacy and civil liberties down the road, unintended consequences,
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've talked about these allegations from the administration against immigration lawyers, unscrupulous behavior, threats of sanctions, and how lawyers see that as clear intimidation. Then the really strange case of the DHS email telling a U.S. citizen attorney to deport herself, highlighting potential system errors and, well, the fear that causes.
Right, the macaroni incident.
Then the detention of attorney Amir Makled at the airport, raising serious questions about targeting based on who he represents.
Yeah, the chilling effect concern.
And finally, placing all this within that broader context from the Boston Review, the leaked database, the reports of activists and journalists being harassed, suggesting a wider pattern.
It paints a picture based on these specific reports.
Exactly. And just to reiterate, we're bringing this information based on these sources. We're not endorsing any political viewpoint here, just laying out what's been reported.
Absolutely. Which leads us, I think, to a final point for people to chew on.
Go for it.
Well, if you take all these reported incidents together, what could the long-term impact be, for things like due process, for the ability of vulnerable immigrants to even get legal help if lawyers feel targeted?
Yeah, that's a heavy question. And how does this kind of scrutiny, this reported harassment of lawyers, activists, journalists, how might that affect just advocacy and dissent more broadly in the country?
It really forces you to think about those fundamental constitutional questions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About access to justice, freedom of speech, government oversight, lots to consider based on what these reports are suggesting.